My husband raised his champagne flute, toasting to the family legacy while I stood just 5 feet away. He was smiling, but his hand trembled. He thought the shaking was grief for the car accident that had supposedly killed me 2 hours ago. It wasn't. It was the adrenaline of a man who didn't realize the waiters locking the ballroom doors behind him were actually plainclothes detectives waiting for my signal. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The Sunday brunch at my mother-in-law's estate in Buckhead was always a theatrical performance disguised as a family meal. I sat at the mahogany table, the wood polished to a shine that reflected the forced smiles of everyone around me. The air in the room was stale, recycled through vents that hadn't been cleaned in a decade, smelling of old money and fresh desperation. I hated these Sundays. I hated the way the sunlight filtered through the dust motes in the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating the cracks in the plaster that Lucinda tried to hide behind expensive oil paintings. I wanted to be anywhere else. I thought about the audit I had left open on my laptop at home, a complex forensic accounting case involving a shell company in the Caymans. That was where I felt comfortable. Numbers made sense. Debits equaled credits. If there was a discrepancy, you hunted it down until the ledger balanced. But here, at this table, nothing balanced. The emotional debt this family had racked up was astronomical, and I was the one constantly paying the interest. My husband, Derek, walked in from the kitchen. He was holding a ceramic mug with both hands, cradling it like it was a holy relic. I watched him cross the Persian rug. His gait was stiff, unnatural. He looked like an actor who had forgotten his blocking and was trying to improvise his way through a scene. "Here you go, babe," he said, placing the mug in front of me. His voice was a little too high, a little too eager. "I made this just for you. It is that artisanal roast you bought last week. I added some of that hazelnut syrup you like." I stared at the mug. Steam curled off the surface, carrying a scent that was almost right, but not quite. It smelled like hazelnut, yes, heavy and cloying, but underneath that there was something else, something sharp, something metallic, like the taste of a penny held under your tongue. My instincts, honed by 15 years of hunting down financial fraud, flared to life. Why was Derek making me coffee? Derek didn't make coffee. Darnell didn't even know how to operate the Keurig without asking me which button made the water go. He was a man who expected service, not a man who provided it. I looked up at his face. He was sweating. Beads of perspiration were gathering at his hairline, despite the fact that Lucinda kept the house at a frigid 68 degrees. He was avoiding my eyes, staring intently at the rim of the cup as if willing me to lift it. "Drink up," he urged, wiping his palms on his designer jeans. "It will get cold. You know how you hate cold coffee." I didn't hate cold coffee. I drank cold coffee every day because I was usually too busy fixing his financial mistakes to finish a cup while it was hot. He was lying. But why? My mind raced through the possibilities. Was he trying to soften me up? Did he crash the car again? Did he lose another $5,000 on a sure-thing sports bet? Or was it something worse? I reached out and wrapped my fingers around the handle. It was warm. I saw Derek's shoulders relax, just a fraction of an inch. He was terrified. I could see the pulse jumping in his neck, a frantic rhythm that betrayed his casual tone. He wasn't just nervous about a gambling debt. This was fear, primal, shaking fear. I lifted the mug halfway to my mouth and paused. The metallic smell hit me harder now, acrid and chemical, fighting against the artificial sweetness of the hazelnut. I looked at the liquid. It was dark, opaque, an abyss in a ceramic cup. "Is everything okay?" Derek asked, his voice cracking. "You are acting weird." "I am acting weird?" I thought. "You are the one vibrating like a tuning fork." I forced a smile, a tight stretching of lips that didn't reach my eyes. "It smells strong," I said. "Did you use a new filter?" "No, just drink it, Kara, please." I made an effort. The desperation in his voice was the final red flag. He wasn't asking me to drink coffee. He was asking me to complete a transaction. He needed me to consume this. Why? What happened if I didn't? What happened if I did? My stomach twisted, a knot of intuition tightening in my gut. I wasn't going to drink it. I knew that with absolute certainty, but I needed to know why he wanted me to. I was about to set it down, to make an excuse about feeling nauseous, when the dining room doors swung open. Bianca swept into the room like a hurricane in a silk blouse. My sister-in-law didn't walk. She arrived. She was followed closely by her husband, Malcolm, who trailed in her wake like a dinghy towed behind a yacht. Bianca looked at the table, her eyes scanning the spread of pastries and fruit with a critical sneer. "Finally," she sighed, dropping her Hermes bag onto an empty chair. "I am starving." The traffic coming out of the city was a nightmare. Malcolm took the wrong exit again. Malcolm muttered a quiet apology, pulling out her chair for her. She ignored him, her gaze landing instantly on the mug in my hand. It was the only hot drink on the table. Lucinda hadn't brought out the tea service yet. Bianca's eyes narrowed. She looked from the steaming cup to my face, and I saw the familiar spark of entitlement ignite. "Coffee," she said, not as a question, but as a demand. "God, I need caffeine. My head is splitting." She reached across the table, her manicured hand hovering over the space between us. "Give me a sip, Kara. You haven't touched it yet." It wasn't a request. In Bianca's world, what was mine was hers, and what was hers was untouchable. I froze. I looked at Derek. His face had gone the color of old ash. His eyes were wide, fixed on Bianca's hand. "No," he blurted out. It was too loud, too sharp. Bianca stopped, her hand mid-air, and looked at her brother. She raised an perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "No," she repeated, a laugh bubbling up that sounded like glass breaking. "Since when do you care if I have a sip of coffee, Derek? You're acting like I asked for a kidney." It is Kara's," Derek stammered, sweat now rolling freely down his temple. "I made it for Kara. It has milk in it. You know you hate milk." "I don't hate milk," Bianca scoffed, rolling her eyes at Malcolm as if to say, "Can you believe this idiot?" "And I don't care. I just need a hit of caffeine before Mama Louise comes in here and starts lecturing me about my hemline." She looked at me, her expression shifting to that toxic, pitying smile she used whenever she wanted to remind me of my place. Unless, of course, Kara doesn't want to share. You know how she gets about her things. So possessive. The trap was set. I saw the mechanics of it perfectly. If I refused, I was the selfish, barren sister-in-law who wouldn't even share a cup of coffee. I would be the villain of the brunch before the first croissant was eaten. But if I gave it to her... I looked at the mug. I looked at Derek. He was shaking his head frantically, a microscopic movement that only I could see. He knew what was in there. He knew it was dangerous. And he was terrified that his target was about to change. But here was the kicker, the thought that turned my blood to ice. He wasn't stopping her. He wasn't grabbing the cup away. He wasn't knocking it over. He was paralyzed by his own cowardice. He would rather let his sister drink poison than admit to his wife that he had tried to kill her. That realization hit me harder than a physical blow. He was willing to let Bianca be collateral damage to protect his secret. A cold, dark calculation formed in my mind. I was an auditor. I dealt in facts, in evidence. If I didn't drink it and I just poured it out, I would never know for sure. I would spend the rest of my life wondering if I was paranoid, wondering if my husband was a clumsy barista or a murderer. But if Bianca drank it, I would have my answer, and I would have my proof. "Don't be silly, Bianca," I said, my voice smooth and steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. I pushed the mug across the tablecloth toward her. "You know I always share. Derek just wanted it to be special, that is all. But you look like you need it more than I do." Derek made a choking sound. "Kara, don't," he whispered. But it was too late. Bianca's fingers closed around the handle. She smirked at me, a look of petty triumph. She thought she had won a power struggle. She thought she had taken something from me. "Thanks, sweetie," she said, her tone dripping with false gratitude. "You are a lifesaver." She lifted the cup to her lips. I watched, time seeming to slow down to a crawl. I saw the steam rise. I saw her lips part. I saw Derek close his eyes, unable to watch the consequence of his own inaction. She took a long, deep swallow. She hummed, lowering the cup. "It is a little bitter. Did you burn the beans, Derek?" She took another sip, larger this time. "Definitely bitter," she said, frowning, "but it will do." She set the cup down, half empty. I leaned back in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The ledger was open. The transaction was processed. Now we just had to wait for the audit. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes of excruciating small talk while the poison worked its way into her system. Lucinda had finally made her entrance, descending the grand staircase and complaining about the humidity affecting her joints. She sat at the head of the table, commanding the room, oblivious to the fact that a murder weapon was sitting on the lace tablecloth to her right. Bianca was picking at a melon slice, looking bored. Then she coughed. It was a small sound at first, a clearing of the throat, but then she did it again, harder. She brought her hand up to her neck, rubbing the skin. "Is it hot in here?" she asked, her voice sounding raspy, like she had swallowed sand. "I feel itchy." I watched her closely. A flush was creeping up her neck, a bright, angry red that clashed with her silk blouse. "The air is on, Rebecca," Lucinda said dismissively, pouring herself tea. "Stop complaining. You always complain." "No," Bianca wheezed. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "My throat. It feels tight." Derek was staring at his plate, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork. He wasn't eating. He was waiting for the bomb to go off. Bianca gasped, a terrible wet sound. She clawed at her collar, popping a button. Her lips were swelling, turning a terrifying shade of blue. "I can't," she choked out. Panic exploded in the room. Malcolm jumped up, knocking his chair over. Babe, what is wrong?" "Air," she mouthed, her eyes bulging with terror. She grabbed the edge of the table, swaying. Then she collapsed. She hit the floor with a heavy thud, dragging the tablecloth with her. Plates shattered. Silverware clattered. The mug, the half-empty mug, tipped over, spilling the dark liquid onto the Persian rug. "Oh my God!" Lucinda shrieked, standing up and pressing her hands to her cheeks. "She is dying! Someone do something!" Malcolm was on the floor next to her, trying to loosen her clothes. "Call 911!" he screamed at me. "Kara, call 911!" I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. But my eyes were on the mug. Amidst the chaos, amidst the screaming and the crying, my mind was crystal clear. I dialed the emergency number and put it on speaker, shouting the address to the operator. "Anaphylaxis," I said clearly. "Severe allergic reaction. Throat closing. We need an ambulance now." While Malcolm was trying to perform CPR and Lucinda was wailing in the corner, I moved. I didn't move toward Bianca. I moved toward the spill. I dropped to my knees, pretending to help, pretending to clear the broken glass. "Derek," I yelled, "get her EpiPen. Does she have an EpiPen?" Derek was frozen in his chair, staring at his sister's convulsing body. He looked like a statue of guilt. I don't know," he whispered. I reached into my purse, which I had dropped on the floor. I found the small, empty jar of moisturizer I always carried for my dry hands. It was plastic, screw top, perfect. Shielded by the drape of the fallen tablecloth, hidden from the hysterical eyes of the family, I scooped up the mug. There was maybe a tablespoon of liquid left in the bottom. With a steady hand that surprised even me, I poured the dregs into the cosmetic jar. I screwed the lid on tight. I dropped the jar back into my purse. Then I placed the mug back on the floor, on its side, exactly where it had fallen. "She is turning purple," Malcolm sobbed. "Where is that ambulance?" I stood up, my purse heavy with the weight of the evidence. I looked at Bianca. She was thrashing weakly, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. I felt a pang of horror, a human reaction to suffering, but it was buried under a layer of cold, hard rage. That foam was meant for me. That gasping struggle for air was meant to be my last moment on Earth. Derek had sat there and let her drink it. He hadn't moved, he hadn't spoken. He was a monster. And as the sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder and louder, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just going to divorce him, I was going to destroy him. The waiting room at Piedmont Hospital was a purgatory of beige walls and fluorescent lights. The hum of the vending machine was the only sound competing with Lucinda's sobbing. She was pacing back and forth, clutching a rosary she never used, muttering prayers that sounded more like demands. Malcolm was with the doctors. Bianca had been intubated in the ambulance. They said it was touch and go. Derek was sitting in a plastic chair, staring at his shoes. He looked small. He looked like a child waiting for the principal to come out and expel him. I sat opposite him, my back straight, my purse clutched in my lap. I was running the timeline in my head. The coffee, the smell, the switch, the reaction. It had to be a nut oil. Bianca was deathly allergic to walnuts. Derek knew that. Everyone knew that. If he had put walnut oil in that coffee, it was a binary weapon. Harmless to me, lethal to her. Wait, no, that didn't make sense. If it was meant for me, why use walnut oil? I wasn't allergic to nuts. Unless it wasn't just walnut oil. Unless the walnut oil was just the delivery mechanism, or maybe a way to mask the taste of something else? My mind spun. If he wanted to kill me, he would use a sedative, a poison. If he used walnut oil, he was targeting her. But he gave the cup to me first. He insisted I drink it. Maybe he didn't know about the oil? No, he made the coffee. "This is your fault," a voice hissed. I looked up. Lucinda had stopped pacing. She was standing in front of me, her eyes red-rimmed and venomous. The grief on her face had been replaced by a familiar, sharp-edged hatred. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice calm. "You," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at my face. "You gave her that cup. I saw you. You pushed it right at her." I blinked. "Lucinda, she asked for it. She demanded it." "She is your sister-in-law," Lucinda screamed, drawing the attention of a nurse at the desk. "You know she has allergies. You know she is sensitive, but you are so careless." She took a step closer, looming over me. "Or maybe you aren't careless. Maybe you are just jealous." "Jealous?" I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. "Jealous of what? The debt? The fake designer bags?" "Jealous because she gave me grandchildren," Lucinda shrieked. "Jealous because she is a real woman and you are just a dried-up husk. You wanted to hurt her. You wanted to punish her for being beautiful and happy." I looked at Derek. "Are you hearing this?" I asked him. "Tell her, Derek. Tell her you made the coffee. Tell her you put the syrup in it." Derek looked up. His eyes met mine, and for a second I saw the conflict. I saw the fear. But then I saw the survival instinct kick in. He looked at his mother, then back at me. I told her it was special," Derek mumbled, his voice weak. "I made it for Kara. I didn't know she would give it to Becky. I tried to say no, Mom. I really did." He paused, swallowing hard. "But Kara, she just handed it over. She smiled when she did it." The betrayal took my breath away. He was rewriting the narrative in real time. He was painting me as the villain. He was suggesting that I knew there was something wrong with the coffee and gave it to Bianca on purpose. He was setting me up. If Bianca died and they found poison, he was going to say I tampered with it. He was going to say I spiked it to kill her. "You see?" Lucinda crowed, triumph mixed with her rage. "Even your husband sees it. You are wicked, Kara. If she dies, I will make sure the police know exactly who handed her that cup." I stared at them, the mother and the son, united in their lies, united in their need to make me the outsider, the scapegoat. I could argue. I could scream. I could tell them about the smell, about Derek sweating. But they wouldn't listen. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a witch to burn. And I realized, with a clarity that was almost calming, that I was in immediate danger. Not physical danger, but legal danger. If I stayed here, I was playing by their rules. I needed to get out. I needed to get to a lab. I needed to find out what was in that jar in my purse before the police started asking questions. I let my shoulders slump. I covered my face with my hands. I forced a sob to rack my body, channeling the very real terror I felt into a performance of guilt and grief. "I didn't know," I wailed, my voice muffled by my palms. "I swear I didn't know. I just wanted to be nice. I thought she wanted coffee." I looked up at Lucinda, tears streaming down my face. "I am so sorry, Lucinda. Please, I can't handle this." Lucinda sneered, stepping back as if my grief were contagious. "Save your crocodile tears. You make me sick. Get out of my sight." "Go," she commanded, pointing at the exit. "Go home. We don't want you here. Malcolm doesn't want you here." I looked at Derek. He was studying the floor again, unable to witness the scene he had orchestrated. "Derek," I whimpered, maybe I should go get fresh clothes for everyone? Or food?" Derek nodded quickly, relieved to have me gone. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Yeah, go home, Kara. We will call you if anything changes." I stood up, shaking, looking like a broken woman. "Okay," I whispered. "I will pray for her." I turned and walked toward the automatic doors. I kept my head down, shoulders hunched, shuffling like someone crushed by guilt. But the moment the cool night air hit my face, the moment the door slid shut behind me, the act dropped. I straightened my spine. I wiped the tears from my cheeks with a quick, efficient swipe. I marched to my car, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the pavement. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were steady as I started the engine. I pulled the cosmetic jar out of my purse and held it up to the streetlight. The dark brown liquid sloshed inside. It looked innocuous. It looked like garbage. But it was the key to my freedom. I didn't go home. Home was a crime scene. Home was where Derek might have left other traps. I put the car in gear and drove toward the industrial park on the west side of town. I knew a place. I checked the clock on the dashboard. 8:45 p.m. They closed at 9. I pressed the accelerator. I had 15 minutes to change the trajectory of my life. The sign for Apex Toxicology was barely lit. It was a nondescript brick building sandwiched between a tire warehouse and a failed startup incubator. I parked my car in the shadows, away from the security cameras of the main entrance. I ran to the door and pulled, locked. I swore under my breath and pounded on the glass. "Hello!" I shouted. "Please, open up!" I saw a shadow move inside. A man in a white lab coat carrying a backpack walked into the hallway. He looked at me, shook his head, and pointed to his wrist. Closed. I pounded again, harder this time. I pulled a $100 bill from my wallet and pressed it against the glass. He paused. He walked closer, squinting at me through the door. It was Simon. I recognized him. I had used this lab 3 years ago for a corporate fraud case, where an executive claimed he was drugged to explain an embezzlement. Simon was the one who found the sedatives. "Simon!" I yelled through the glass. "It is Kara from the Sterling case." Recognition flickered in his eyes. He unlocked the door and opened it a crack. "Kara?" he asked, looking at my disheveled appearance. "We are closed. I am late for dinner." "I need a favor," I said, breathless. "A big one. And I need it off the books." Simon's eyes narrowed. "I don't do off the books, Kara. You know that." I like my license. I am not asking you to falsify anything, I said quickly, wedging my foot in the door so he couldn't close it. I just need a rush analysis, an emergency. I held up the cosmetic jar. I need to know what is in this. He looked at the jar, then back at me. Is that face cream? It is coffee, I said, and I think it has poison in it. The word hung in the air between us. Simon stepped back, opening the door wider. Poison? He whispered. Kara, if this is a police matter... It isn't, I lied. Not yet. I need to know before I go to the cops. Please, Simon. My sister-in-law is in the ICU. He hesitated. I reached into my purse and pulled out my emergency cash envelope. I counted out $500. Cash, I said, for your time, and for the rush. He looked at the money. He looked at my desperate eyes. He sighed and grabbed the jar from my hand. You have 20 minutes while the machines run, he said, turning around and walking back into the lab. But if this turns out to be just Starbucks and anxiety, you are buying me dinner. Deal, I said, following him inside. I stood by the spectrometer, watching the lines peak and valley on the monitor. My heart was pounding in my throat. Simon frowned at the screen. He typed something, adjusted a setting, and ran it again. That is weird, he muttered. What? I asked, leaning forward. What is it? Well, Simon said, pointing to a high spike on the graph, you were right about the nut allergy. This is saturated with walnut extract. High concentration, like someone boiled down a bag of walnuts and poured the oil in. Okay, I said. That explains the reaction. But what else? Simon tapped the screen. This, he said, circling a smaller, jagged peak. I almost missed it because the organic compounds from the coffee masked it. But this is synthetic. He looked at me, his face serious. It is a benzodiazepine, a heavy sedative, but it is mixed with something else, an antiemetic. Antiemetic? I asked. To stop vomiting, he explained. Whoever made this cocktail didn't want the victim to throw it up. They wanted them to keep it down so the sedative could absorb fully. He paused, doing the math in his head. Kara, with the walnut oil, the reaction would close the throat. The victim would struggle to breathe. And the sedative? I asked, my blood running cold. The sedative would slow the respiratory drive, Simon said quietly. It would make them stop fighting for air. They would just go to sleep and suffocate. It is a binary weapon, I whispered. The allergy creates the crisis. The sedative ensures it is fatal. Simon nodded. And because the symptoms mimic severe anaphylactic shock, confusion, drowsiness, passing out, the doctors might miss the sedative until it is too late. They would treat the allergy, but the respiratory failure would kill them. He looked at the jar with new respect. This wasn't an accident, Kara. This was designed. I took the printout he handed me. The paper was warm. It was the heat of a smoking gun. Thank you, Simon, I said, my voice trembling. Delete the record. Kara, delete it, I commanded. I was never here. I walked out into the night, the printout folded inside my bra. Derek hadn't just tried to kill me. He had engineered a masterpiece of murder, and he had used his own sister as the test subject. I drove back to the estate in Buckhead with the toxicology report burning a hole in my bra, right next to my racing heart. The drive usually took 30 minutes, but tonight, time seemed to warp. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror looked like a police cruiser, or worse, Derek's car. Paranoia was a cold companion, whispering in my ear that he knew, that he was waiting for me, that the brake lines were already cut. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to breathe. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the investigator, and I was returning to the scene of the crime. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed out of the darkness like a mausoleum. It was a sprawling Georgian brick monstrosity that Lucinda insisted was historic, but was really just a drafty money pit I had spent the last 5 years renovating. The windows were dark. Good. That meant Derek was still at the hospital, playing the role of the concerned brother, holding Lucinda's hand while Bianca fought for air. I parked the car in the garage, killed the engine, and sat in the silence. The house was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt occupied by the ghosts of every lie Derek had ever told me. I walked to the door, my keys jingling in my shaking hand. I dropped them twice before I managed to slide the key into the lock. Inside, the air was still thick with the scent of the morning's disaster, the lingering smell of cleaning solution where the maid had scrubbed the rug, and the faint, ghostly aroma of that cursed hazelnut coffee. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to alert the neighbors or give Derek a beacon if he decided to come home early. I used the flashlight on my phone, the beam cutting a narrow path through the foyer. I walked past the dining room, refusing to look at the spot where Bianca had collapsed. I needed to get to Derek's office. If there was a plan, if there was a trail, it would be there. Derek wasn't a criminal mastermind, despite what the toxicology report said. He was sloppy. He was arrogant. And arrogant men always kept trophies. I climbed the stairs, the wood creaking under my feet like gunshots in the quiet house. My mind was racing, analyzing variables. If he came home, what would I say? I practiced the lie in my head. I was just looking for insurance papers, honey. I was looking for your medical proxy. Lies. All lies. I pushed open the door to his home office. It smelled of leather polish and his expensive cologne, a scent I used to find comforting, but now smelled like betrayal. I shone the light around the room. It was a shrine to his ego. Framed photos of him shaking hands with minor local celebrities lined the walls. His college diploma, framed in gold leaf, hung behind the desk. I stepped inside and closed the door softly behind me. I was trembling, my body rejecting the reality of what I was doing. I was tossing my own husband's office. I was hunting for proof that the man I slept next to was a killer. "Pull it together, Kara," I whispered to myself, the sound harsh in the silence. "Audit the books. Follow the money. Find the dirt." I started with the desk. It was a massive mahogany piece he had bought with a bonus I earned 3 years ago. I sat in his chair, the leather cold against the back of my legs. I opened the top drawer. Junk. Loose change, a few dried-out pens, a stack of business cards for a consulting firm he had started and abandoned in 6 months. I checked the bottom drawer. Files. I flipped through them rapidly. Utility bills, car lease agreements, old tax returns. Nothing incriminating. Nothing that screamed murder plot. I moved to the bookshelf. I pulled out books, shaking them to see if anything fell out. I ran my hand behind the rows of hardcover biographies he had never read. Dust. Just dust. Panic started to prick at the back of my neck. He wouldn't leave the evidence out in the open. He wasn't that stupid. But where? I stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, scanning the space with my auditor's eyes. I looked for the anomaly. I looked for the thing that didn't fit the pattern. My gaze landed on the closet door. Derek was obsessed with appearances. His closet was usually organized by color and season. I walked over and slid the door open. Rows of suits hung in plastic bags. But on the top shelf, stacked almost to the ceiling, was his sneaker collection. Derek collected Jordans like some men collected coins. Dozens of orange and black boxes perfectly aligned. I dragged the stepladder over. I started pulling them down, one by one. Empty. Shoes. Shoes. Empty. I was 5 boxes in, and sweat was trickling down my spine. This was a waste of time. He wouldn't hide a murder weapon in a shoe box. It was too cliché. I reached for a box on the far left, pushed back into the corner, almost hidden by a garment bag. It was an older box, the cardboard slightly crushed at the corner. I pulled it down. It felt wrong. It was too light to hold a pair of size 12 high tops, but the weight distribution was off. It shifted when I tilted it. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, and placed the box in front of me. I held my breath. I lifted the lid. There were no shoes inside. Instead, nestled in a bed of crumpled tissue paper, was a cheap black smartphone, a burner. My heart slammed against my ribs. Why would my husband, a man who insisted on having the latest iPhone the day it was released, have a $50 prepaid Android phone hidden in a sneaker box? There was only one reason. This was his secret life. This was the line of communication he didn't want me to audit. I reached in and picked it up. It was cold and sleek. I pressed the power button on the side. The screen lit up with a harsh white glow, displaying a generic logo. Then it changed. Enter PIN. 4 digits, 4 numbers standing between me and the truth. I looked at the keypad. I had 3 tries before it locked me out, maybe 5 before it wiped itself if he had set it up securely. I didn't have a hacker friend. I didn't have a backdoor. I just had my knowledge of the man I had married. I stared at the blinking cursor. The screen cast a ghostly blue light on my face, illuminating the fear in my eyes. Think, Kara. Think like a narcissist. Think like a cheater. I tried the obvious first, his birthday. 0315. The screen flashed red. Incorrect PIN. Try again. My breath hitched. Okay, not his birthday. Too easy. Maybe our anniversary? I typed in 0620. Read again. Incorrect PIN. 3 attempts remaining. My hand started to shake uncontrollably. 3 attempts. If I messed this up, I lost the evidence. I lost everything. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to calm down. I tried to get inside his head. He wouldn't use our anniversary. He didn't care about our marriage. This phone was for Bianca. It was for their world, their secrets. It would be a number that mattered to them. I thought about Bianca. I thought about her birthday, September 12th. I typed 0912. I held my breath, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Read, incorrect PIN. Wait 30 seconds. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. 30 seconds. The timer counted down on the screen, mocking me. I put the phone on the floor and put my head between my knees. I was overthinking it. Or maybe I was underthinking it. What did they share? What was important to them? Not me, not Lucinda. Money? No, numbers were too long. I thought about the brunch. I thought about how Bianca acted. She was entitled. She was childish. She treated her dog, that wretched Pomeranian, better than she treated her husband, Barnaby. She threw that dog a birthday party last year, a catered party. Derek had gone. He had bought the dog a diamond-studded collar. I remembered the fight we had about the credit card bill. It is just for fun, Kara, he had said. Barnaby is family. When was the dog's birthday? I racked my brain, sifting through the useless trivia of my sister-in-law's life. It was in the spring. April? May? May 4th? May the 4th be with you, Malcolm had joked, and Bianca had rolled her eyes. The timer on the phone hit 0. The keypad reappeared. I hesitated. It was so stupid. It was so incredibly vaporous. But they were vaporous people. They were people who lived on the surface. I typed 0504. The screen went black for a second. My stomach dropped. I had wiped it. I had destroyed the evidence. Then the home screen appeared. A generic background of a beach. Unlocked. I let out a sob that was half laugh, half wail. The password was the dog's birthday. He was risking a life sentence for murder, and he secured his communications with the birth date of a Pomeranian named Barnaby. It was pathetic. It was insulting, and it was exactly who he was. I didn't waste a second celebrating. I tapped the green message icon. There was only one conversation thread. The contact name was simply B, not Becky, not Bianca, just B. I opened it. The thread went back months. I started scrolling, my eyes devouring the text. At first it was just smut. Graphic, stomach-churning descriptions of what they did in hotels, in cars, in my guest room while I was at work. I felt bile rise in my throat. I love it when you wear that red thing, Derek had written. Kara never wears red. She is so boring." "Kara is a prude," Bianca had replied. "She is dried up. I can't wait until we don't have to hide." I forced myself to keep reading. I wasn't looking for infidelity. I knew about the affair in my gut, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself. I was looking for malice. I scrolled up to last week, and there it was, the shift in tone, the shift from sex to strategy. "I checked the policy," Derek wrote on Tuesday. "It is double indemnity for accidental death. $5 million B, $5 million. "That is enough," Bianca replied. "Enough to leave Malcolm, enough to get away from Mama's nagging. How do we do it?" "I have an idea," Derek wrote. "Simple, clean, no blood." "Tell me," she said. "Binary," he wrote. "I read about it online. You mix a heavy sedative with an allergen. The allergy masks the symptoms. Everyone looks at the throat closing up. Nobody notices the lungs stopping." I stopped breathing. He had written it out. He had typed out his own confession. "What about the taste?" Bianca asked. "She has a palate like a hawk. She will know." "Hazelnut syrup," Derek replied. "I bought the strong stuff. It covers everything, and I will use walnut oil. It is potent." "Walnut," Bianca texted back. "Derek, are you stupid? I am allergic to walnuts." "I know, baby," he wrote. "I am not giving it to you. I am giving it to her. You just have to make sure you are not around when she drinks it, or better yet, be there and act surprised." "Okay," she wrote. "Do it on Sunday at brunch. Mama will be distracted." "Done," he said. "Sunday. Then we are free." I lowered the phone. The room seemed to spin. They had planned it. They had discussed the method, the timing, the alibi. Bianca knew about the walnut oil. She knew. So when she took that cup from me... Wait. My mind snapped back to the brunch. Bianca had demanded the cup. She had fought me for it. Why? I looked at the timestamp on the text about the walnut oil. It was sent 3 days ago. But Bianca didn't read everything. She was a skimmer. She was the kind of person who read the headline and ignored the article. I scrolled down. There was a text from her this morning, right before they arrived. "I am so hungover. Need coffee ASAP." "I got you," Derek wrote back. "Just wait until we get there." He didn't remind her. He didn't say, "Don't drink the special cup." He assumed she remembered. And she, in her hungover, entitled stupor, saw a cup of coffee and took it. It was a comedy of errors, a tragedy of incompetence. They were so busy plotting my death that they forgot to protect themselves from their own weapon. I took a picture of the screen with my own phone, then another. Then I scrolled and took pictures of the entire thread. I wasn't trusting this burner phone to stay alive. I needed backups. I needed hard copies. I had the toxicology report. I had the texts. I had the motive. I had everything I needed to go to the police. But as I sat there, looking at the glowing evidence of my husband's hatred, the police felt insufficient. Prison was sterile. Prison was a systemic punishment. I wanted something personal. I wanted them to feel the way I felt right now, helpless, exposed, bankrupt. I put the burner phone back in the shoebox. I put the box back on the shelf exactly where I found it. I arranged the garment bag to cover the corner. If Derek came home, he would find nothing amiss. I walked out of the bedroom and down the hall to my own office. It was smaller than his, but functional. No ego, just 3 monitors and a high-speed secure server. I sat down and woke up the computer. The familiar glow of the screens washed over me, calming my racing heart. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. I logged into our joint bank accounts. Access granted. I saw the balance. It was lower than it should have been, much lower. I clicked on the transaction history, withdrawals, cash advances, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. He had been bleeding us dry for months, preparing for his exit, preparing for his new life with Bianca. "Not today, Satan," I muttered. I navigated to the security settings. I selected the primary checking account. Report lost stolen. Freeze card. I did the same for the savings account. I moved to the credit cards, the Platinum Amex, the Sapphire Reserve, the business line of credit. Click, click, click. Status: frozen, contact bank security. Then I went to the withdrawal limits. I couldn't freeze the ATM access completely without alerting him instantly via text, but I could make it useless. I changed the daily withdrawal limit from $1,000 to $10. $10. Enough to buy a sandwich, but not enough to buy a tank of gas to get out of town. I sat back, watching the little padlock icons appear next to each account number. It was petty. It was vindictive. And it was the most satisfying thing I had ever done. "I am just protecting you, honey," I whispered to the empty room, rehearsing the line I would feed him later. I saw suspicious activity. I had to stop the hackers. The hackers being him. The suspicious activity being attempted murder. But I wasn't done. I checked the credit bureaus. I needed a full picture of the battlefield. I pulled his Equifax report. It took a moment to load, the little circle spinning. When it popped up, I gasped. The score was tanked, 580. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the new accounts section. I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting at the line item. Magnolia Lending Group, secured loan $500,000. Opened 6 months ago. Status: current, barely. Collateral: residential property, 1402 Oakwood Drive. My address, my house. I felt the blood drain from my face. How? I owned the house. I bought it before we were married. His name wasn't on the deed. He couldn't take out a loan against it. Unless. I clicked on the View Documents link. The PDF opened slowly. It was a home equity line of credit agreement. I scrolled to the bottom. There were 2 signatures. Derek Washington. And next to it, Kara Washington. I stared at my name. It looked like my signature. The loop on the K was right. The slant was correct. But the pressure was wrong. I was a forensic auditor. I looked at signatures all day. I knew how a pen moved across paper when a person was confident, and how it moved when they were copying something. There was a hesitation mark at the top of the W, a microscopic ink blot where the pen had paused. It was a forgery, a good one, likely traced from a document I had actually signed, but a forgery nonetheless. He had stolen my identity. He had walked into a predatory lender's office, probably with a fake ID or a notary he had bribed, and mortgaged my home to fund his murder plot. $500,000. Where was the money? I checked the disbursement date, 6 months ago. I cross-referenced it with the withdrawals I had seen earlier. He wasn't saving it. He was spending it. $70,000 to a consultant in Vegas, gambling debt. $30,000 to a jewelry store in Buckhead, Bianca's diamond collar and God knows what else. $20,000 to a luxury car rental agency. He had blown through $500,000 in 6 months. He had stolen my house, spent the money on his mistress and his gambling addiction, and now he was trying to kill me to get the life insurance payout to cover the hole before I found out. It was a Ponzi scheme of betrayal, and I was the last investor. I printed the loan document. I added it to my pile of evidence. The fear was gone now, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had tried to take my life. That was personal, but he had messed with my credit score and my assets. That was professional, and professionally speaking, I was about to liquidate his entire existence. I closed the laptop. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark driveway. Headlights swept across the trees. He was home. "Showtime, Kara," I whispered. I smoothed my hair, fixed my face into a mask of worried exhaustion, and went downstairs to greet the man who had just tried to kill me. The hospital gift shop was a depressing kaleidoscope of pastel teddy bears and balloons that screamed, "Get well soon" in cheerful, bubbly fonts. I stood in the aisle, gripping a foil balloon shaped like a star. My hands were sweating, not from nerves, but from the plastic casing of the digital voice recorder I had shoved up my sleeve. I had bought it at an electronics store on the way over, along with a roll of industrial-strength double-sided tape. It wasn't high-tech spy gear. It was a $40 dictaphone meant for college lectures, but it had a 12-hour battery life and a high-sensitivity microphone. It was crude, but it was all I had. "That will be $5.50, hon," the cashier said, popping her gum. I paid cash. "Keep the receipt," I said, forcing a smile. I needed a paper trail for the balloon, proof of my sister-in-lawly devotion, but the recorder receipt was already shredding in the bottom of my purse. I walked back toward the elevators, the balloon bobbing mockingly behind me. The ICU waiting room was empty. Lucinda must have gone home to change, or to pray, or to complain about the hospital cafeteria food. Derek wasn't there either. Perfect. I checked the nurse's station. Shift change. The chaotic 15 minutes where paperwork was swapped and attention spans were short. I slipped past the desk, keeping my head down, looking like just another weary visitor. Room 304. The door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly. The room was dim, lit only by the blinking lights of the monitors. Bianca was asleep, or unconscious. She looked small in the bed, her face pale and waxy, tubes running into her arms like a spider web. The ventilator was gone, replaced by an oxygen mask that hissed rhythmically. I felt a momentary flicker of pity, a biological reflex to seeing suffering. Then I remembered the text message. Simple. Clean. No blood. She had helped design her own murder. She just didn't know she was the target. Pity evaporated. I moved quickly. I tied the balloon to the bed rail, making sure the knot was tight. "Just bringing you some cheer, Bianca," I whispered to the unconscious woman. Then I dropped my purse. "Oops," I muttered. I knelt down to retrieve it. Shielded by the bed frame, I pulled the recorder from my sleeve. I peeled the backing off the tape. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. If a nurse walked in now, if Bianca woke up. I reached under the metal frame of the bed, feeling for a flat surface. I found a crossbar near the headboard. I pressed the recorder against the cold metal and held it for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I clicked the record button. A tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. It was live. I grabbed my purse and stood up, dusting off my knees. "Sleep tight," I whispered. I walked out of the room, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had just planted a bug. I was officially crossing the line from victim to vigilante. I didn't leave the hospital. I moved my car to the far end of the parking garage, under the shadow of a concrete pillar. I had a second device, a baby monitor receiver I had paired with a transmitter I'd slipped into the floral arrangement I left on the windowsill. It was risky. The range was terrible, but if I stayed close enough, I could hear. I sat in the dark, the receiver crackling with static on the passenger seat. For an hour, there was nothing but the hiss of the oxygen mask and the occasional beep of a monitor. I was about to give up, to drive home and wait to retrieve the main recorder later, when I heard the door open. Footsteps. Heavy, pacing footsteps. "Babe?" It was Derek. His voice was a frantic whisper. "Babe, wake up. Mom just left. We need to talk." A groan crackled through the speaker. "Water," Bianca rasped. Her voice was wrecked, sounding like she was gargling gravel. I heard the clink of a plastic cup, the sound of swallowing. "You idiot," she hissed, her voice gaining a little strength from the anger. "You almost killed me." "No, baby, no," Derek stammered. I swear on my life it was her. She switched the mugs. She knew Bianca. She looked right at me and smiled when she did it. I gripped the steering wheel. He was still selling the lie. He was doubling down on my guilt to save his own skin. "Liar," Bianca spat. "You wanted to get rid of me, didn't you? You realized 5 million splits better one way than two. You figured if I died, you could pin it on Kara for making the coffee and walk away with everything." I smiled in the darkness. Paranoia was a beautiful thing. I didn't even have to plant the seed. Their own narcissism was doing the work for me. "Bianca, please," Derek begged, sounding like he was on the verge of tears. "You have to believe me. I love you. We are in this together. I need you to stick to the plan." "The plan?" She laughed, a wet, wheezing sound that made my skin crawl. "The plan where I end up in a coma? I am done with your plans, Derek. If the police come asking, I am telling them everything. I am telling them you made the coffee." "Don't you dare." Derek's voice dropped an octave, turning cold. "If I go down, you go down. I have the texts, Bianca. I have the emails. You are just as guilty as I am. You helped me pick the poison." Silence stretched between them, heavy and toxic. The static hissed. "Get out," she whispered finally. "Get out before I scream." "I am going," Derek said. "But think about it. If you rat me out, you get nothing. If we stick together, we can still win. She doesn't know anything. She is just a dumb accountant." I let out a short, sharp laugh. "Just a dumb accountant." He had no idea. He thought the audit was over because he had closed the book. He didn't know I was writing a whole new ledger. The next morning, I bought flowers. Not roses, not daisies. I bought stargazer lilies, huge pink pollen-heavy lilies. I knew Bianca hated them. She claimed they smelled like a funeral home, cloying and suffocating. Perfect. I walked into room 304 like I owned the place. The morning sun was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Derek was there, asleep in the visitor's chair, his mouth open, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Bianca was awake, staring at the ceiling. She looked over when I entered, and her eyes went wide with genuine fear. "Good morning," I chirped, my voice bright and cheerful. I walked straight to the bedside table and plonked the massive vase down right next to her head. "I brought you these. I know how much you love fresh flowers." The scent hit her instantly. She recoiled, pressing herself into the pillows, her hand flying to her throat. "Get them away," she wheezed. "I can't. The smell, I can't breathe." "Oh, hush," I said, patting her hand a little too hard. "You are just sensitive right now. They are beautiful. Smell them." I leaned in, pushing the vase closer. "Derek said you needed cheering up." Derek jolted awake at the sound of his name. He scrambled up, wiping drool from his chin. "Kara?" he asked, blinking rapidly. What are you doing here?" "Just visiting family," I said, beaming at him. "I wanted to see how our patient was doing." I turned back to Bianca, my expression shifting just enough to let the mask slip. My eyes bored into hers, cold and unblinking. "I am so glad you made it, Bianca," I whispered, leaning in close so only she could hear the steel in my voice. "It would have been a shame if you died before you had the chance to pay back every single thing you owe." She stared at me, trembling. She saw it then. She saw the knowledge in my eyes. "And trust me," I added, straightening up and smoothing my skirt. "The interest rate is going to be a killer." I turned to Derek. "Ready to go home, babe? You look exhausted, and you have that big dinner tonight with your investor." Derek went pale. He had forgotten. "Right," he stammered. "Yeah, the dinner." "I think Bianca needs her rest," I said, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the door. "She has a lot to think about." I looked back one last time. Bianca was staring at the lilies, looking like she was trapped in a coffin. "Enjoy the flowers," I called out. 7 o'clock. I sat in my home office, the glow of my dual monitors illuminating the room in a cool blue light. Derek had left an hour ago, dressed in his best suit, claiming he was meeting a venture capitalist named Rocco at a high-end steakhouse in Buckhead. I knew Rocco. I had looked him up. Rocco wasn't a venture capitalist. He was a loan shark who operated out of a gym in Decatur and charged 10% interest a week. Derek was taking him to dinner to buy time, to beg for an extension on the $500,000 he had stolen and squandered. He was planning to put the bill on the Amex I had frozen yesterday. I took a sip of water and clicked the mouse. My banking portal was open on the left screen. Status: frozen. I leaned back and waited. I didn't need a camera to see what was happening. I knew the script by heart. Across town, in a booth with leather seats and white tablecloths, the scene was playing out. The waiter would drop the leather folio. Derek would reach for it with feigned confidence, flashing his watch, smiling that salesman's smile. Rocco would be watching his eyes, dead and cold, picking his teeth with a toothpick. Derek would slide the platinum card in. The waiter would walk away. 5 minutes would pass. Then the walk of shame. The waiter returning, leaning down to whisper so as not to embarrass the other guests, but loud enough for Rocco to hear. "I am sorry, sir. The card was declined." My phone buzzed on the desk. Alert. Transaction declined. Amex ending in 1004. Amount $450. Merchant, Chops Lobster Bar. I smiled. Derek would laugh a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Impossible," he would say. "Try this one." He would hand over the Visa. Buzz. Transaction declined. Visa ending in 5521. Then the MasterCard buzz. Transaction declined. The sweat would start then, the prickly heat rising up his neck. Rocco wouldn't laugh. He would lean across the table, his voice low and heavy like a bag of wet cement. "You are wasting my time, Derek." I could almost hear the threat. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. He was trapped. He was humiliated. And he was terrified. This was better than shouting. This was better than a slap in the face. Eat. This was a systematic dismantling of his ego. It took 45 minutes for him to get home. I was in the living room, reading a book on forensic audit methodologies, looking the picture of domestic tranquility. The front door slammed open so hard the handle punched a hole in the drywall. Derek stormed in. His tie was loosened, hanging askew. His suit jacket was flapping open. He looked like a man who had run a marathon through a swamp. His face was a mask of fury and humiliation, purple with rage. "You!" he roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "What did you do? You cut me off. You embarrassed me in front of a major investor." I marked my page and looked up, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. "Hello to you too, Derek. How was dinner?" "Don't play games with me, Kara," he screamed, pacing back and forth on the rug I had bought with my bonus last year. "The cards were declined, all of them. Rocco walked out. Do you know what you have done? You have ruined a multi-million-dollar deal." He was lying, of course. There was no deal, only debt. But he was committed to the performance. He was sweating profusely, the terror of Rocco's threat bleeding through his anger. "I had to call the bank from the parking lot," he ranted. "They said the primary account holder authorized a freeze. Why? Why would you do that to me?" He was looming over me now, using his physical size to intimidate me. It usually worked. Usually I would shrink back, apologize, try to fix it. Not tonight. I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. I walked over to him, stopping just inside his personal space. I looked him in the eyes, searching for any trace of the man I thought I married, but finding only a desperate grifter. "I didn't do it to hurt you, Derek," I said, my voice soft, almost caring. "I did it because I got a security alert." He stopped pacing. He blinked, confused by my calm. "What?" "What alert?" "The bank's fraud detection system flagged some unusual activity," I explained, watching his pupils dilate. I kept my voice steady, concerned, the loving wife protecting her husband's assets. Apparently, there were attempted charges on the dark web. Someone was trying to buy large quantities of industrial-grade chemical solvents and toxins. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Specifically, fentanyl precursors and walnut oil extract. The color drained from Derek's face so fast it looked like he was about to faint. He staggered back a step, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. The air left the room. It was very specific. I continued, tilting my head, looking at him with wide, innocent eyes. The fraud department said it looked like someone was trying to manufacture a binary poison. Can you imagine? A binary poison? He squeaked. Yes, I said. I was so terrified that someone had stolen your identity that I froze everything immediately. To protect you, honey. I reached out and touched his arm. He flinched as if I had burned him. We can't have anyone thinking you are involved in something illegal like that, can we? Derek gripped the back of the sofa, his knuckles white. He looked at me, terrified. He knew. He knew that I knew. But he couldn't say a word. He couldn't admit that the charges weren't fraud because that would be a confession to attempted murder. He was trapped in his own lie, suffocating in the very safety net I claimed to be providing. He stammered, sweat dripping down his temple. Don't worry, I said, patting his cheek. I will keep them frozen until the bank finishes a full investigation. It might take months, but it is better to be safe than sorry, right? I smiled. We wouldn't want the police to get the wrong idea. I turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving him standing there in the ruin of his financial life. He was terrified of his loan shark. He was terrified of the bank. And for the first time in our marriage, he was truly terrified of me. I walked up the stairs, my heart soaring. I had just neutralized him without lifting a finger. He couldn't run. He couldn't pay his debts. He was stuck in this house with the woman he tried to kill, and he had to pretend to be grateful for it. It was psychological torture, and I was just getting started. I met Malcolm at a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital. He looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped under the weight of his wife's medical crisis and his brother-in-law's financial erraticism. He was a good man, a simple man who worked hard as a landscape architect and loved his wife blindly. Too blindly. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But he was collateral damage in a war he didn't even know was being fought. I sat across from him, clutching a manila envelope, my face a mask of worried confusion. Malcolm, I said softly, pushing the envelope across the scratched wooden table. I need your help. I was going through Derek's business expenses, trying to sort out the mess with the frozen accounts. I paused, letting my lip tremble just slightly. I found these. I thought maybe they were for a family gift or a surprise party I forgot about. Malcolm opened the envelope. His hands were rough, calloused from working with soil, a stark contrast to Derek's manicured softness. Inside were 3 receipts from the St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead. They were dated 2 months ago. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I knew exactly what he was seeing because I had memorized them. Room service for 2, I narrated in my head as he read. Champagne, oysters, a couple's massage package. The reservation was under the name Mr. and Mrs. D. Washington. Malcolm frowned, his brow furrowing. 2 months ago? He asked, his voice thick. That was the weekend Bianca went to that wellness retreat in Savannah. She said she needed to clear her head. I nodded slowly, letting the implication hang in the air like smoke. Derek told me he was at a tech conference in Austin that weekend, I said, but look at the signature on the room service charge. Malcolm stared at the paper. It wasn't Derek's signature. It was a loopy, distinctive script with a heart over the I. It was Bianca's handwriting. I saw the color drain from his face. The denial was instant, the reflex of a man who couldn't bear the truth. Maybe she met him there, he stammered, looking for a lifeline. Maybe Derek surprised her. They are close, Kara, you know that. Maybe she was sad and he went to comfort her. In the honeymoon suite, Malcolm? I asked gently. With a couple's massage? I reached out and touched his hand. And there is something else. Look at the credit card statement. I pulled out a printout of the Amex charges. This is Derek's secret card, the one I froze. Look at the charges from that weekend. A lingerie shop in Phipps Plaza, a jewelry store. Malcolm stared at the numbers. He was shaking his head, a silent no over and over again. "She wouldn't," he whispered. "She loves me. We have kids." "She is a liar, Malcolm," I thought. "She's a parasite." But I couldn't say that. I had to let him hear it. I didn't want to believe it either, I lied. But when I was at the hospital, I heard something. I pulled out my phone. I had edited the audio file from the bug I planted. I had spliced together a masterpiece, a 30-second clip that stripped away every layer of Bianca's innocent act. "I recorded this because I thought they were hiding financial assets," I said, but it turned out to be much worse. I pressed play. The sound of the hospital room filled the space between us, tinny but unmistakable. Bianca's voice cut through the noise of the coffee shop. "Malcolm is a loser, Derek," she rasped. "He is weak. He can't afford the life I deserve. I am sick of pretending to love a man who counts coupons." Malcolm flinched as if he had been slapped. His mouth fell open. The recording continued. "Once we get Kara's money, I am leaving him in the dirt where he belongs. We will be free, baby." "I love you, B," Derek's voice replied. "We just have to stick to the plan." I stopped the recording. The silence at the table was absolute. Malcolm stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over onto his cheeks without him realizing it. He didn't look angry. He looked destroyed. He looked like a man watching his entire life burn down in seconds. "She said that?" he whispered. "She called me a loser?" "She called you an obstacle," I corrected gently. "And she called me a paycheck." Malcolm stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing looks from the other patrons. He looked wild, unmoored. "I have to go," he said, his voice shaking. "I have to talk to her." "Malcolm, wait," I said, reaching for him. But he was already moving. He stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving his tea untouched. I watched him go, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. I had just weaponized the only decent man in the family. He was going to the hospital. He was going to confront her. And the wedge between the conspirators was going to be driven so deep they would never recover. It didn't take long for the blowback to arrive. Derek must have called his mother the second Malcolm left the hospital room. A grown man of 36, hiding behind his mother's skirt because his wife had cut off his allowance, and his brother-in-law knew the truth. I was expecting her. In fact, I had prepared tea. I sat in the living room, the morning sun filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors I had paid to refinish last month. At exactly 8 in the morning, the front door rattled under the assault of a heavy fist. I opened it. Lucinda stormed in like a hurricane in a Sunday hat. She didn't wait for an invitation. She marched straight into the foyer, her heels clicking aggressively against the tile. Derek trailed behind her, looking like a scolded puppy, his eyes red and puffy. "Kara, we need to talk," Lucinda announced, clutching her designer handbag, the one I bought her for Mother's Day, to her chest like a weapon. She didn't scream. That was the first warning sign. Lucinda usually screamed. Today her voice was low, coated in a sugary glaze of fake concern. "We are worried about you, Sugar," she said, walking into the living room and surveying my furniture. "Derek tells me you are having episodes." I raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorframe. "Episodes?" I asked. "He says you are paranoid," she continued, sitting down on my sofa without asking. "He says you are freezing accounts, making up stories about poisons and dark webs. He says you are hysterical." She shook her head sadly. "It is the stress, isn't it? Not having children. It does things to a woman's mind. It makes you unstable." The audacity was breathtaking. She was using my infertility, a medical issue she knew devastated me, as a weapon to declare me incompetent. "I am perfectly fine, Lucinda," I said, keeping my voice cool. "I am just protecting our assets." "But are you?" she asked, tilting her head. "Derek says you are ruining his business deals. You are embarrassing the family." She stood up and walked toward me, invading my personal space. Her perfume was cloying and thick. "We have spoken to the family attorney," she said softly, placing a hand on my arm. It felt like a claw. "We think it is best if you sign over the title of this house to me, just for safekeeping, until you are well again." "Safekeeping?" I laughed, a dry sound. "You mean theft." "Don't be difficult, Kara," she cooed, her grip tightening. "We are trying to help you. If you don't do this voluntarily, we might have to have you committed, for your own good." There it was, the threat wrapped in velvet. "You want the house?" I asked. "I want to preserve the Washington legacy," she declared. "This house carries our name. You are just a guest here, really. You are a glorified broodmare who couldn't even do that one job." "And a walking ATM," I added. "Don't forget the money." "Exactly," she sneered, dropping the mask for a split second. "You are a checkbook with a pulse, Kara, and right now that checkbook is malfunctioning." I smiled. I reached into my pocket and tapped the stop button on my phone. "Get out," I said. "What?" she gasped. "Get out of my house, Lucinda, before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "Try me." She fled. She grabbed Derek by the arm and dragged him out the door faster than I had ever seen her move. I slammed the door behind them and locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and let out a long breath. They were desperate. Derek was terrified of Rocco. Lucinda was terrified of losing the legacy. Bianca was terrified of Malcolm leaving her. They were a pack of rats trapped in a corner, and they were about to bite. They needed the money. They needed the $5 million from the life insurance policy, and they needed it now. The poison hadn't worked. The gaslighting hadn't worked. The threat of institutionalization hadn't worked. There was only one option left: violence. I knew Derek. He wasn't a planner. He was a reactor. He would panic. He would try something crude, something fast. I went to the garage. I had ordered a set of high-definition infrared cameras online the day after the poisoning. They had arrived this afternoon. I spent the next 2 hours on a ladder, installing them in the corners of the garage ceiling. I hid them behind boxes, angling them to cover the entire space, especially my Mercedes. I connected them to a cloud server, ensuring the footage would be uploaded instantly. Then I checked the car. It was pristine. Derek had washed it 2 days ago, probably trying to suck up to me before the poisoning. I checked the tires. I checked the fluid levels. Everything was normal, for now. I went back inside and locked the door from the garage to the kitchen. I reinforced it with a chair wedged under the handle. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom. I didn't sleep in the master bed. I locked the bedroom door and pushed the dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed with my iPad, the camera feed glowing on the screen. I was the spider in the web. I just had to wait for the fly. Desperation has a distinct smell. It smells like sour sweat and cheap wire cutters in a humid garage at 2 a.m. I lay in my bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets pulled up to my chin, watching my husband try to kill me on the screen of my iPad. The house was silent save for the hum of the air conditioning. But on my screen, the drama was playing out in ghostly shades of green and gray. Derek had crept out of the guest room 20 minutes ago. I heard his footsteps, soft and hesitant, moving down the hall. I heard the garage door click open. He was wearing his dark gym clothes, a hoodie pulled up over his head, thinking he was invisible in the shadows. He didn't know that the little red light blinking behind the stack of storage bins was recording his every move in 4K resolution. He stood by the car for a long time. He was pacing. I could see him wiping his hands on his pants over and over again. He was scared. Good. He should be. He looked at the door to the house, checking to see if I was coming. He looked at the window. Then he dropped to his knees. He slid underneath my Mercedes GLS. It was a beautiful car, the symbol of my success and his inadequacy. He hated that car. He hated that it was in my name, that I bought it with a bonus check he never saw. I zoomed in on the feed. The camera angle was perfect. I could see his legs sticking out, his sneakers scraping against the concrete. I saw the flashlight beam dancing on the undercarriage, and I saw the tool in his hand, heavy-duty wire cutters, the ones he had borrowed from Malcolm last summer and never returned. My heart should have been racing. I should have been terrified lying there, knowing the man I shared a roof with was actively sabotaging my vehicle. But all I felt was a cold, clinical detachment. It was like finding a discrepancy in a ledger. The numbers didn't add up. And now I had found the error. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was a liability, a dangerous, malfunctioning asset that needed to be liquidated. He reached up into the undercarriage. I watched the screen, mesmerized by the brutality of the act. He hesitated for a moment, his hand shaking. Was it a pang of conscience? Doubtful. It was probably just fear. Fear of getting caught. Fear of messing up again. Fear of me. Then he clamped the jaws of the cutters around the brake line. I saw his muscles tense as he squeezed. It wasn't easy. Modern cars are built to last, but hate is a powerful motivator. He grunted, his body jerking with the effort. With a sudden snap, his hand flew back. A dark spray erupted on the screen, brake fluid. It coated his arm, dripping onto the concrete floor like black blood in the night vision feed. He had done it. He had severed the line. He scrambled out from under the car, wiping the fluid from his face with his sleeve. He looked around frantically, his eyes wide and white in the darkness. He grabbed a rag from the workbench and hastily wiped the floor, smearing the fluid rather than cleaning it. Amateur. He tossed the rag into the trash can in the corner. He didn't even take the evidence with him. He crept back toward the door, checking his shoes, checking his clothes. He unlocked the door to the kitchen and slipped inside. I switched off the iPad and slid it under my mattress, just as I heard his footsteps softly ascending the stairs. He paused outside my door, listening. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing, feigning sleep. The handle turned slowly, locked. He waited. He was checking to see if I was still there, still alive for a few more hours. He walked away down the hall to the guest room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I lay there plotting, calculating the variables of the next day. He had set the trap, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. The trap doesn't care who steps in it. Morning came with a deceptive brightness. Sunlight flooded the kitchen as I made my tea, casting long, sharp shadows across the marble island. Derek came down a few minutes later. He looked haggard. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he moved with a nervous, jittery energy. He poured himself a glass of juice, his hand shaking so much a few drops spilled onto the counter. He quickly wiped them up, his eyes avoiding mine. "Good morning," he mumbled, checking his watch for the third time in a minute. "Heading to work early?" I took a sip of tea, watching him over the rim of my cup. "Yes," I said. "I have a big client meeting downtown, mergers and acquisitions, very intense." He nodded too quickly. "You should take the Mercedes," he blurted out. "You want to look impressive for the partners, right? Make sure you get there on time." The eagerness in his voice turned my stomach. He was practically pushing me out the door into a metal coffin. He wanted that phone call. He wanted the police to tell him his wife had lost control on the winding hill outside our subdivision. He was already spending the life insurance money in his head, mentally paying off Rocco and buying Bianca a new wardrobe. I smiled a tight, thin smile. "Actually," I said, setting my cup down on the counter with a deliberate clink, "I am not driving today." Derek froze, his glass halfway to his mouth. "What?" "I want to go over the files on the way in," I lied smoothly. "I need to be prepared. I don't want to be distracted by traffic." I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. "I called an Uber Black. It will be here in 5 minutes. "Besides," I added, watching his face closely, "the Mercedes has been making a funny noise lately. The brakes feel soft. I should probably have it looked at before I drive it again." The panic flared in his eyes, instant and raw. He had set the trap, and I had just sidestepped it. Now he was left with a sabotaged vehicle in the garage and a wife who was still breathing. "No," he stammered. "I mean, it is probably fine. You really should drive, Kara. It is a power move. Show them who is boss." I patted his arm, channeling every ounce of fake affection I could muster. "You are so sweet, always looking out for my image. But my mind is made up. The Uber is here." I grabbed my briefcase and walked to the front door. I paused with my hand on the knob and looked back at him. He was standing in the kitchen, pale and sweating, staring at the door to the garage like it was the gates of hell. "Have a great day, honey," I called out cheerfully. "Oh, and if you need to go anywhere, maybe just stay home today. You look like you are coming down with something." I walked out the door and climbed into the waiting black sedan. The driver, a polite man named Thomas, nodded at me. "Downtown, ma'am?" "Yes, please," I said. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house. The garage door was closed, hiding the weapon he had created. He thought he had failed. He thought the plan was ruined. He didn't know that I was simply saving the car for a different driver. The trap was still set. It just needed new bait. I sat in the back of the Uber, watching the Atlanta skyline rise against the morning sun like a jagged row of teeth. It was a beautiful day for a tragedy. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I waited until we were out of the neighborhood, out of sight. I needed him to be desperate. I needed him to be late for his own imaginary redemption. I checked the time, 8:30. He had told me his meeting with the investors, really a begathon with Rocco, was at 9:30. He had an hour. If he left now, he would make it. If he waited, he would be late, and men like Rocco didn't tolerate lateness. I opened my messaging app. I typed out the text that would seal my husband's fate. "Hey babe," I wrote, adding a sad face emoji for effect. "I noticed your rear tires were completely flat this morning when I went into the garage to get a water bottle. I think you might have run over some nails in the driveway." I paused, visualizing the scene. He would rush to the garage. He would see his car, which I had deflated myself at 4 a.m. using a tire pressure gauge to hold the pin open, sitting on its rims. I continued typing. "I called the mechanic, but they said they can't get out there until this afternoon. Since I took an Uber, why don't you take the Mercedes? The keys are on the kitchen counter. You can't be late for your big meeting. Good luck." I hit send. Then I leaned back and closed my eyes. I could imagine the gears turning in his head. He would read the text. He would curse his bad luck. He would look at the Mercedes keys gleaming on the marble counter. A rational man would call a taxi. A rational man would cancel the meeting. But Derek was not a rational man. He was a narcissist and a gambler who believed he could outsmart physics. He looked at the keys. He thought about the brake line he had cut. He probably told himself it was just a small nick, or that there was enough fluid left in the reservoir for one short trip. He probably thought he could just drive slowly, use the emergency brake if he had to. His arrogance was his blind spot. He wanted to roll up to his meeting in a $100,000 car to show his creditor that he was good for the money. He couldn't show up in a taxi. That smelled like failure. He grabbed the keys. He walked into the garage. He ignored his own crippled vehicle and slid into the driver's seat of mine. The engine roared to life. He backed out of the driveway. He probably tested the brakes at the end of the drive. They would have worked. There is always a little pressure left in the lines at first, just enough to give you a false sense of security. Just enough to get you up to speed. I was sitting at my desk, pretending to review a spreadsheet, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, my voice calm and professional. "Mrs. Washington?" a voice asked, heavy and serious. "Speaking." "This is Officer Reynolds with the Atlanta Police Department. I am afraid there has been an accident. Your husband was driving your vehicle." My heart didn't skip a beat. "Is he alive?" I asked, injecting just the right amount of tremor into my voice. "He is alive, ma'am," the officer said, "but it is bad. He lost control coming down the hill near your subdivision. The car is totaled. We had to use the jaws of life to get him out." "Oh my God," I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand to stifle a laugh that was bubbling up in my throat. Is he conscious?" "Barely," Reynolds said. "Both his legs are broken, and he has some internal injuries. He's being transported to Grady Memorial right now." "I will be there right away," I said. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, savoring the silence. He was alive. Good. Death was too easy. Broken legs meant he was immobile. He was helpless. He was trapped in a hospital bed just like the sister-in-law he tried to kill. The universe had a sense of humor, and I was laughing right along with it. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, ready to play the grieving wife one more time. Grady Memorial smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, a scent that now turned my stomach for reasons entirely unrelated to caffeine. I walked into the trauma bay. Derek looked small, broken, and pathetic. Both of his legs were casted and elevated, suspended in traction pulleys. His face was a map of purple and yellow bruises, and his lip was split. Standing next to his bed, notebook in hand, was Officer Reynolds. The air in the room was thick with tension. I rushed forward, letting a ragged sob escape my throat. "Oh, baby!" I cried, burying my face in my hands for a moment before reaching out to touch his uninjured shoulder. "Look at you. I was so scared when the officer called. I thought I had lost you." Derek flinched at my touch. His eyes were wide with a primal fear. He looked from me to the police officer and back again. He was trapped in his own body. "Ma'am," Officer Reynolds said, clearing his throat, "I am just trying to get a statement from Mr. Washington about the cause of the accident. The skid marks suggest he didn't brake until it was too late. It is a straight road, Mr. Washington. We need to know what happened." I held my breath. This was the moment. Derek stared at the officer. He knew. He knew the brake line was severed because he was the one who severed it. If he told the truth, if he screamed that the brakes failed, the police would investigate. They would tow the wreckage to a forensic lot. They would see the clean cut made by wire cutters. They would find his DNA on the undercarriage. He would be admitting to attempted murder. But if he lied, Derek croaked, his voice rough. He looked at me. I smiled at him, a tiny, almost imperceptible curling of my lips. "Tell him, honey," I whispered. "Tell him what happened." Derek swallowed hard. I was distracted," he whispered. I dropped my phone. I took my eyes off the road for a second to grab it, and when I looked up, the tree was right there. I panicked. I hit the gas instead of the brake. It was my fault. Officer Reynolds nodded, writing it down. "Distracted driving. Reckless operation. You are lucky to be alive, son. That car is a pancake." He closed his notebook. "I will leave you two alone." The officer walked out. The moment the door clicked shut, I leaned in close to Derek's ear. "You missed," I whispered. "You tried to kill me twice in 1 week, and you missed both times." "You are getting sloppy, Derek." He started to cry, silent tears leaking from his eyes. "Please," he whimpered. "Please don't hurt me." "I don't have to," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "You are doing a great job of hurting yourself." 3 days later, I sat in the plush office of a private equity firm in Midtown. David, an old colleague from my auditing days, sat across from me. "You are sure about this, Kara?" he asked, tapping the file on his desk. "This is a distressed asset. The mortgage on the Buckhead estate is 6 months in default. The foreclosure process is messy." "I know," I said. "I want to buy the note. All of it. Cash." David raised an eyebrow. "This is personal, isn't it?" "It is just business, David," I lied. "I see potential in the land value." He pushed the contract toward me. "Okay, you wire the funds and you own the debt. You become the bank. You can evict, foreclose, whatever you want." I signed the paper with a flourish. I wasn't just Lucinda's daughter-in-law anymore. I was her landlord, and her eviction notice was already drafted in my briefcase. The night of Mama Lucinda's 40th anniversary gala arrived with a humidity that made the air feel heavy and expectant. I had convinced her to go through with it. It will be a triumph, I had told her, a show of strength. People need to see that the Washington family is unshakable. She believed me because she wanted to believe me. I had rented the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. I had invited everyone. The church deacons, the neighbors, Derek's fraternity brothers, Malcolm's business partners, 300 people. I wheeled Derek in first. He was wearing a tuxedo jacket over his hospital gown, his casts propped up on the leg rests. He looked like a wounded war hero, and the guests ate it up. Bianca followed, wheeled in by a nurse I had hired. She looked waifish and pale in a pink dress, playing the victim perfectly. Lucinda stood at the entrance, greeting guests, oblivious to the fact that she was the guest of honor at her own execution. "You are a good girl, Kara," she whispered to me, squeezing my arm. "I knew you would come to your senses." I smiled. "I have a special surprise for you later, Lucinda, a tribute video." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, honey, that is wonderful." Dinner was served. Filet mignon and lobster tail. Lucinda sat at the head table beaming like a queen. Derek and Bianca were on either side of her, looking tragic and brave. I walked to the stage. The room went quiet. "Welcome, everyone," I said into the microphone. "Tonight is a night of truth. I have prepared a very special presentation to show you exactly what the Washington legacy looks like." I signaled the technician. "Lights." The room plunged into darkness. The massive screen behind me flickered to life. It started with the security footage from the bedroom, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. Derek and Bianca, tangled together. The audio was crisp. "Once Kara is gone, we will have it all." Derek's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers. $5 million, baby! A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lucinda dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, but the sound was drowned out by the video cutting to the next scene. The kitchen. Derek mixing the white powder into the coffee mug, stirring it with manic intensity. Then the garage. The infrared footage of Derek cutting the brake lines. The snap of the wire cutters echoed like a gunshot. Finally, the audio from the hospital room. Bianca's voice. "Kill that bitch. Kill her. And we take the money." The screen went black. The lights came up. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a world ending. Lucinda had turned a shade of gray I didn't know existed. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way, and she slumped back into her chair. But Malcolm didn't slump. He stood up. He moved with a speed and fluidity I had never seen in him. He vaulted over the table, ignoring the crash of plates, and grabbed the handles of Derek's wheelchair. "You monster!" he roared. He spun the chair around and punched Derek square in the jaw. Derek screamed, trapped in his casts, unable to defend himself. Malcolm hit him again and again. Pandemonium erupted. Guests were screaming, scrambling for the exits. The double doors burst open. But it wasn't hotel security. It was Detective Miller and a squad of uniformed officers. I had timed the call perfectly. "Derek Washington, Rebecca Brooks," Miller shouted over the chaos. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and grand larceny." They swarmed the head table. They pulled Malcolm off Derek. They handcuffed Bianca in her wheelchair. Derek was screaming as they dragged his chair backward. "She set me up! She's a witch! She planned this!" He looked at me, standing on the stage, untouched by the mayhem. I raised my glass of champagne. "Cheers, honey," I mouthed. I visited Derek in prison 2 weeks later. He was in the infirmary ward looking gaunt and broken. "Sign the papers, Derek," I said, sliding the divorce decree through the slot. "If you sign, I won't testify at the sentencing hearing about the previous domestic abuse claims. I will let the attempted murder charge stand alone." He signed. His hand shook, but he signed. He knew he had no leverage left. Then I went to the estate. Lucinda was there, packing boxes. She looked at me with hatred but no fight. "You can't do this," she whispered. "It is family property." "I am the bank, Lucinda," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "and you are evicted." "You have until noon. Anything left behind goes in the dumpster." I walked out to my car. I didn't look back. The house was just a pile of bricks. The legacy was dust. Update. 3 months later. The view from my new penthouse in downtown Atlanta is spectacular. From the 25th floor, the cars look like toys, moving in predictable patterns. I like patterns. I like things that make sense. Derek and Bianca are currently serving 20-year sentences. Their appeals were denied last week. Lucinda is living in a weekly rate motel off the highway. The church board voted to remove her. Her social currency is bankrupt. I was promoted to senior partner at the firm. They liked my attention to detail. I stood on the balcony holding a steaming mug of coffee. I ground the beans myself this morning. Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. No hazelnut syrup, no metallic tang, just the rich, clean taste of survival. I took a sip and watched the sun rise over the city. They thought I was a victim. They thought I was a checkbook with a pulse. They forgot the most important rule of auditing. Eventually, everyone gets exactly what they are owed, and the account is finally balanced. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.